If you were born somewhere between 1965 and 1980, there's a decent chance you've heard the same joke about yourself more than once. You don't talk about your feelings, you just deal with it. And you've probably brushed it off as a personality thing, or a generational thing, or just how I was raised. But there's a real evolutionary reason your brain does this, and it has nothing to do with willpower or emotional maturity. By the end of this video, you'll understand exactly why an entire generation got wired this way and why it's not a flaw at all. If you appreciate this type of content, gently tap that like button. Let's get into it. Alright, first up, let's talk about what this actually looks like. It's not that Gen X doesn't feel things, it's that there's a very specific pattern. Something hard happens, and the instinct is to handle it alone, quietly, and move on. Asking for help feels uncomfortable. Admitting you're struggling feels like a weakness you'd rather hide. Picture the classic scene. A Gen Xer going through a rough divorce, a layoff, a health scare, and when a friend asks, "How are you holding up?" the answer is a flat, "I'm fine, just dealing with it." Even mid-crisis. And here's the thing, this isn't random. Psychologists have a name for the environment that produces exactly this kind of adult, and it goes back to how a huge number of Gen X kids actually grew up. Now, think about the world a lot of Gen X kids were raised in. Divorce rates in the United States roughly doubled between the 1960s and the early 1980s, reshaping millions of households. Dual-income families became the norm as more mothers entered full-time work. And surveys from that era estimated that several million school-age kids were coming home to an empty house on any given day, a phenomenon common enough to earn its own nickname, the Latchkey kid. That's not a criticism of the parents. Most of them were adapting to a rapidly changing economy themselves. But from a kid's perspective, the message the environment was sending, over and over, was simple. Nobody's coming to catch you if you fall. You handle it. So here's where the evolutionary psychology comes in. There's a concept called life history theory, and it basically says this. Your brain isn't just shaped by your genes, it's calibrated by your early environment. When a child grows up in a world that feels unpredictable or under-resourced, emotionally or otherwise, their brain doesn't develop a trusting, lean-on-others strategy. It develops a self-reliant, don't-expect-backup strategy instead. And that's not a bug. That's the brain doing exactly what it evolved to do, reading the environment and adjusting your entire emotional operating system to survive it. Here's the part that really explains the can't talk about feelings piece specifically. In an environment where support is unreliable, showing vulnerability is actually risky. Think about it from a survival logic standpoint. If you show weakness and nobody's there to help, you've just broadcast that you're an easy target for nothing in return. So, the brain learns to treat emotional openness as a cost with no guaranteed payoff, and it starts suppressing those signals before they even reach the surface. It's not that Gen X decided to bottle things up. Their nervous systems were calibrated in real time during childhood to treat suppression as the safer bet. Quick break. If this kind of explanation is clicking for you, the best thing you can do is hit subscribe, because I'm going deep on exactly this kind of pattern across other generations too. Check the description and the pinned comment below for helpful resources on this topic. Alright, back to it. Now here's what most people get wrong about this. They assume this wiring should just switch off once you're an adult with a stable job, a stable home, people who genuinely care about you. But that's not how calibration works. The brain doesn't recalibrate itself just because circumstances improved. That self-reliant, suppress-first setting gets locked in early, and it keeps running in the background for decades, even when the original threat, an unreliable, unsupervised environment, is long gone. That's why so many Gen Xers can logically know they're safe to open up and still feel a wall go up the second a conversation gets emotional. It's not a contradiction. It's an old survival setting running in a new environment that doesn't need it anymore. And there's a real cost to this, one worth naming honestly. Chronic suppression doesn't mean the emotion goes away. It means it gets processed alone, internally, without the regulation that comes from actually being supported by another person. Decades of research on emotion regulation consistently link habitual suppression to elevated physiological stress responses over time, the kind of quiet wear and tear that builds up when a person never lets anyone share the load. Relationships can suffer too, not because the person doesn't care, but because a partner or a friend can't help carry something they were never allowed to see. The wiring that got a kid through a chaotic 1970s or 1980s childhood can quietly work against the adult trying to build closeness now. But here's the important reframe, and it's the whole point of this video. This was never a character flaw. This was an intelligent adaptation to a real environment. The kid who learned to handle things alone wasn't broken. They were solving the actual problem in front of them with the only tools available. Understanding that doesn't erase the pattern, but it changes the relationship you have with it. Instead of, "What's wrong with me?" it becomes, "My brain made a smart bet a long time ago, and now I get to decide if that bet still makes sense today." That's a completely different, much kinder starting point. And if you want to go deeper on exactly how this plays out for another generation, I made a video on the psychology of people who stay home instead of going out, the same evolutionary logic, playing out in a totally different corner of life,